So thank you, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Iris Altilio. I'm an AARP New Hampshire volunteer. I'm really excited to present this topic tonight, this panel discussion on fraud in New Hampshire. I'm also, one of my volunteer duties is as Speaker Bureau volunteer, and I really enjoy giving presentations on fraud, and I'm really going to enjoy hearing what these experts have to say. At AARP New Hampshire, we're focused on the health, financial security, and the social connection critical to the well-being of the 50+ in our Granite State. We carry out our work through targeted advocacy at the state and the federal levels, compelling engagement of the 50+ community statewide, and serving as a trusted resource for information for our members and the public. Today, we are joined by U.S. Attorney Jane Young and 3 subject matter experts from the U.S. Department of Justice and Homeland Security Investigations to discuss fraud and scams that are aimed at exploiting the senior community, and we know that happens all the time. So we're going to start by introducing U.S. Attorney Young. Jane Young, she's the U.S. Attorney for the District of New Hampshire. In this role, she's the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer in our state. Prior to her confirmation as the U.S. State
I'm trying to turn it up, hon.
She served at the New Hampshire Department of Justice for 30 years, most recently as the Deputy Attorney General. U.S. Attorney Young and her team of prosecutors are responsible for investigating all the federal crimes here in New Hampshire, including elder fraud. So I'm going to turn it over now.
I don't know how to.
And welcome U.S. Attorney Young.
I don't know why it's not.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight for this community event, which is focused on preventing elder fraud. And I would like to especially thank AARP for hosting us. Tonight, we want to speak with you about fraud that is happening every day here in New Hampshire. Specifically, tonight, you will hear about different fraud schemes and scams that target our elderly community members. These crimes can take many forms, but they share a common theme: to separate you from the money and the property you have worked your entire life to obtain. Our goal this evening is to educate you on the different scams that we are seeing and to prepare you to protect yourself and your hard-earned assets. Some of you on this call may have already been targeted or victimized by one of the crimes we will be discussing. If that's the case, don't feel foolish or ashamed. These scammers are sophisticated and they are good at exploiting individuals across all demographics and age groups. If you believe you are a victim of financial crime, please immediately contact your local police department. That is what they are there for. If you believe your Medicare information has been compromised, I'm going to ask you to contact the United States Health and Human Services at 1-800-HHS-TIPS. Again, 1-800-HHS-TIPS. We are in this together. The United States Attorney's Office and our law enforcement partners will continue to aggressively investigate and prosecute criminals exploiting our community members, especially members of our senior community. I hope that we will be able to provide you with information tonight that you will find useful, that will leave you prepared, feeling more able to protect yourselves from those who may try to exploit you, because a little bit of education will go a long way. Again, thank you for joining us this evening, and I hope you find this presentation informative.
Thank you so much, Jane, for that introduction. We're also joined tonight by 3 subject matter experts from the U.S. Department of Justice and Homeland Security to assist with questions and the comment from the community. We're going to start by introducing Jay McCormick. He's the first assistant U.S. attorney. He's a career prosecutor with experience at the local, state, and federal levels. He was most recently a white-collar prosecutor for the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. where he focused on national health care fraud cases. Thank you for joining us, Jay.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. I'm excited to interact with you all.
And we'll be hearing more from Jay in a little bit. Next, we're going to introduce Alex Chen, and he's an assistant U.S. attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He's in the office's elder fraud. Let me try that again. He is the office's elder fraud coordinator and prosecutes a variety of fraud crimes. He joined the office in 2021 after working in private practice and for 2 federal judges. And welcome, Alexander.
Well,
Alex.
yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
We're happy to have you. And our last person we're going to introduce is William Krogan. He's an assistant special agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations, that's HSI, the principal investigative arm of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And they're responsible for combating transnational crime organizations and individuals who disrupt public safety and the global infrastructure through which trade, travel, and finance move. William has spent more than 19 years investigating narcotics, financial, and computer crimes. He currently oversees HSI's operations in New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. And welcome, William.
Thank you very much.
And now that we've introduced everyone, I'm going to turn this back over to Jan. Jane, you're on mute.
Iris, I can jump in. So let's start with Special Agent Krogan. Will, let's begin talking about romance scams. And we use that phrase, it's the type of case that we commonly see. Will, can you just talk about what romance scams are and how often do you receive complaints in connection with those types of crimes?
Absolutely, Jay. So fraud gets delivered to people. It gets perpetrated in different forms. And one form is through what we would call a romance scam. And that's essentially what it sounds to be. It's a event where someone may reach out to an individual and establish a relationship with them with the intention of committing a crime of essentially for this purpose, defrauding them, taking their money. And the criminal will make that investment in learning about the victim and building a story, essentially, to basically build trust and then eventually, unfortunately, take advantage of that person. This happens online. Usually it happens in a remote manner. That's what we see most frequently. And to Jay's question, unfortunately, we see this fairly regularly. It's just one way in which fraudsters or criminals try to ingratiate themselves and basically find victims that are sympathetic, good people that are maybe looking to help people or form a meaningful relationship, but that's not the criminal's intent.
So, Will, let me ask you, how are some of the ways that these imposters solicit money or personal identifying information from unsuspecting victims? How do they go about building that trust? What do they do?
So these criminals they'll make contact. Again, they can make contact via email, and it may develop into phone calls, or even in this day and age, FaceTime or a web call. And it's a process where, like any healthy relationship, if you will, people get to know one another. But what we see the fraudsters doing and the criminals doing is they try to exploit information about the victim to build that trust in a quick manner. So they do that, and then they quickly deliver a story or an explanation about something. Perhaps it's like a hardship or some difficulty that the fraudster's really not experiencing. And they'll try to get the victim to send them funds with the ultimate goal of becoming engaged or meeting up for a trip. And it happens over time, but they rely on their ability to get people to fall for their story. That's essentially what happens.
And Will, are you familiar with some of the common types of stories, that these fraudsters will perpetrate?
Yeah, Jay, absolutely. I think one of the most common ones is it's pretty distasteful if you think about it. We'll have fraudsters deliver a story and purport to be a military service member. That's a fairly frequent one where they'll have a story about that isn't true, of course, about their service to the country, and they're looking to meet somebody, or they're in a jam overseas, and they could use some help. So you get some romantic start to the communications, but then an interesting angle where, hey, by the way, I'm down on my luck. So the service member created ones are pretty tough. Also, just the like the dating applications too. So dating platforms, that's a way for fraudsters to basically access legitimate social tools that people use every day to meet people, but they do it to basically find and target victims.
So, Will, what happens once an unsuspecting victim transfers their money or funds, to one of these fraudsters? How do the fraudsters profit out of the scheme?
So yeah, unfortunately, Jay, the money's gone. If in most cases, when a financial transaction happens, and we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit more in detail in terms of the clues or indicators to avoid is, under any circumstances, everybody here understands that if somebody was down on their luck and they're looking to help somebody out, they may not transfer the money with like a series of checks, or buying pieces of precious metals, or buying digital currency. Doesn't really require that many steps to help somebody out, but the bad guys do that to basically conceal their identities and then hide the money, make your money harder for us to find and retrieve. But it starts with something as simple as, could you send me a little bit of money, and then it adds up, and then it starts, and it's twice as much money next time, and before you know it, somebody can be out of incredibly tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in extreme situations. And we want people to know that these criminals are sophisticated, right? It's something that happens to a lot of people, and it can be prevented.
And Will, you mentioned that, once the money's transferred, it's gone. Is there an international component to these types of romance scams in your experience?
Very much so. Yeah, thank you, Jay. So a lot of the time, these fraudsters are based overseas. And the reason that is important for them is it makes it difficult for U.S. law enforcement to track them down. And we rely, obviously, on our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Hampshire to help us find and come up with legal processes to capture them, and bring them back to the United States to face justice. But not every country will honor our legal requests, essentially. So we see that a lot of these criminals, a lot of these fraudsters will position themselves in countries where it's advantageous to hide there, work through the internet, work through the phone lines, find American citizens, and get that money overseas.
So you alluded to this, Will. You mentioned red flags. How would someone know that they're being involved in one of these types of scams, or what are some red flags to look for so you can prevent, being scammed in one of these romance type scams?
I think one of the biggest ones, Jay, is a red flag would be the person asks for money, but they don't just ask for cash. They may ask for money to be converted, and they would ask me, say, hey, Will, could you take a couple steps? Could you, go to the bank, withdraw the money, then take it to a Bitcoin vendor and buy digital currency, which I can tell you is pretty complicated. It's not an easy thing to do necessarily. And then they'll give instructions to send the money to perhaps a third party or somebody else. So these aren't things that naturally happen between two people or parties that trust one another and are looking to help somebody out. So when you see all these intricate steps and these questions, and then you see perhaps a level of aggression from the fraudster that wasn't typical at the start of the relationship, at the start of these conversations. That's when they're trying to close the deal. These are all things that should give people pause because they may grow impatient. They're going to try to get that money from the victim. They've invested time in it, and they want to basically get the money and then run and move on.
So to kind of summarize, the high level, the red flags are cryptocurrency, requested to change your currency to crypto or gold bars or some strange, financial transaction that's out of the norm, right? You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Also, sending the money to a third party, right? That's a red flag rather than sending it to the person you think that you're communicating with. And then you mentioned aggression. Are you talking about they create a false sense of urgency and this has to be done immediately, and they kind of pick up their tenor and their communications?
Absolutely. Yeah, you see that kind of ramp right up. Something's happening now and I need this now, or don't let me down. Please, like I thought we could do this, where reasonable people wouldn't hopefully act that way. So they're trying to close it out because each one of these fraudsters, Jay, as you know, they're basically looking to target as many people as possible. They have a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, and they're basically going from one to another. So when people are skeptical and they stop and they pause and say, hey, this doesn't seem right, like that's like the first line of defense right there.
So Will, what's your recommendation? What should somebody do, someone on the line here, if they know someone that fell prey to one of these very common schemes? What's the first thing that someone should do?
Well, they should stop and think about it. They should collect the facts and they should save those emails or any like notations on phone numbers. However, the communications may have started or been going on, you want to keep those ready. And then, as Jane mentioned, the best resource is a local police department. Unfortunately, these crimes are very prevalent now, and our local partners that HSI deals with, we're used to getting phone calls very regularly where we'll basically partner with the police department. We'll come and work with the victim or the erstwhile victim, the person that was targeted, and we'll come in and we'll ask for those emails. We'll ask for your help getting the records about these communications. And that's the first steps where we try to identify who these bad guys are.
So, Will, I want to switch gears. So we talked about romance scams, and tonight we're going to talk about a bunch of different categories of scams. So let's talk about what we call a grandparent scam or a family scam. Can you just explain to the members of this event what those types of scams are and how they operate?
So also a fraudster, everybody. So you have a criminal who's intent on committing fraud and taking someone's money away from them. But what they do is they pretty distasteful thing. They basically represent that your family member, your grandchild may be in legal jeopardy or may be in a jail overseas, like something that isn't anybody's idea of a good time, right? That's something that everybody would be pretty fearful of. Anybody that we would care about, you don't want that to happen to them. So you have this basically misrepresentation on about the family member, and what they do is they obviously pull at people's emotions to try to basically get a quick hit of money. It's different than that longer term kind of romance buildup where the relationship and the communications happen. This is like a quick hit. Like it's important to note. It's like, hey, we need you to send us $1,000, $10,000 before your grandson is going to get presented before the judge and locked up, and the key's going to get thrown away. That's essentially the gist of it.
So, Will, if someone gets a type of call, obviously that's very concerning. A loved one is in a very awful predicament, requesting money at the last minute. What should someone do to confirm, is this legitimate or not? What type of steps would you want people to know about?
I would ask the caller, the fraudster, say, hey, like where is so and so, or where are you calling from? Can I have your name and number? What office do you work at? you take a step back, and again, like the first line of defense is that wariness and that caution, because that's going to slow things down. And the fraudsters a lot of times will just move on. They have 10 other people to call or to target in the next half hour, and they're just going to move on from anybody who puts up any level of skepticism or just stops and says, hey, wait a sec, well, tell me where he is. My grandson, I didn't know my grandson was overseas. So it's really hard to do in the heat of the moment. That's something we're all aware of, but taking those steps to question the person, ask them to identify themselves, provide a phone number, email, legitimate title, of their job. Nobody's going to call and do that from any legitimate origin and call and ask for money. Things just don't work that way.
And Will, in these types of schemes, in your experience, is there also an international component?
Yeah, very much so, Jay. Exactly. You can essentially look at it. I would suggest that it's the same types of criminals. Again, professional fraudsters that are based in calling centers overseas, where the criminals organize their efforts. They target victims through email and phone records, and they basically have an agenda. They start their day out going through phone lists and looking for people. And, it's a lot easier for them to do that in a foreign country than it is across town, or say out in California, where, the arm of U.S. law can reach people pretty quickly.
I would add that
Go ahead.
oftentimes red flag is broken English. These fraud centers, there are massive fraud centers like Nigeria, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. They have massive amount of employees, and their English is usually not that great. It's not perfect. If you hear a strong accent, it sounds very suspicious. If their English doesn't make much sense to you, that's also a red flag to pay attention to.
That's a great point, Alex. So Will, switching gears. So we talked about romance scams. We talked about grandparent family type scams. What's a phishing scam?
So a phishing scam is a little more sophisticated. This is tough. So something to share with the audience here is my home agency, Homeland Security Investigations, within our email system that we use every day, we get tested with emails that may come into our inbox, and it'll appear to come from my boss or my colleague or a legitimate business, but there'll be an address will be slightly different than what it would normally be. And when you look at the email, it may have a link in it asking you, imploring you to, hey, please click on this to see the attachments you requested. And these are tests that my home agency delivers to us as employees. And I try to keep my fingers crossed, and you notice them every time, but this is trying to train us to keep an eye out for these emails. So yeah, phishing is an email with bad intentions that is basically trying to appear as legitimate, right? It's may come from your utility company. It may come from even like someone with a name or a friend, someone you know, but there would be essentially a link in it that could be loaded with malware that could start surveillance of your computer, so on and so forth. And it's very, very easy to miss these out. People are rushing through their email like I do. They're looking in their inbox, and these are they're like Trojan horses, if you will.
Will, can you just talk about an example of a case that you're familiar with that involved a phishing scam, and what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So phishing scams have been around for a little bit. They haven't gone away because they're effective. And we've participated in investigations where upfront we'll find we'll be contacted by a victim. It could be a police department like we talked about. It could be someone who lost money or had their identity stolen. That's just as that creates just as many problems for people as it is to lose your assets. So what we do is we work backwards. When we're contacted, we try to do a review of the email records and identify the chain of basically addresses where the email may go. And sometimes the investigators, we get lucky. We may have a bad guy that's in a country that we can get to, we can travel to, that will honor our legal order processes that Alex or Jay, may author. But it's basically, Jay, as you know, as Alex, as you know, it's a pretty long and arduous trip to basically find the link in the email and then find the people behind it. Because at the end of the day, we want to find the people that are sending these emails to basically steal people's information or their money or assets. It's a long process, but every once in a while we're successful.
Well, how does it work once you click the link and the malware is installed? How does that lead to scamming you of money or information?
So what it'll do is most of the malware will sit back and discreetly monitor your activities, either by keystrokes or by the web traffic you may conduct. And then what happens is the fraudsters create a picture of your activities and your assets. If I go to Citizens Bank, if I go to Bank of America, these pieces all start to build up a picture that makes me vulnerable because I basically have malware stored on my computer. All of us, rely on our computers every day to do business, to read for leisure, to communicate with people. And the more that the computer's used, the bigger the picture that it gets, and it sets the stage. That's the key part, is it sets the stage for a future fraud. Now, the fraudster may take that information and then give it to another part of the criminal organization, a different fraudster that will reach out, and maybe they'll do a romance scam. Maybe they'll initiate another kind of scam via email or a phone call, and they're privy to information that most strangers wouldn't be privy to.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the software kind of sits in the back and starts collecting data and information about you, and they use that for vulnerabilities or to exploit something in your life that they know is coming up, whether it's a real estate closing or something else. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. You think about all the business that's conducted via email, right? Like Jay, to your point, where it's critical business transactions, even though some like information's embedded in there, again, look at it as a puzzle. Pieces of the puzzle get fit together, and then as the picture clears up, if I'm the victim, I'm basically much easier to exploit. When the puzzle's almost complete after the installation of this malware.
So, Will, what are some things that the AARP members and general public like myself, we get these emails, the testing emails at work, and I've fallen victim to them as well. What can we do to protect ourselves from these types of scams?
Well, just like the calls, just like the romance scam or the family scams, it's maintaining that sense of vigilance. But I'm sensitive to that. I know how hard it is to keep up on my emails and watch out for something that may be nefarious. But that's the first line of defense. And then technically speaking too, it's, people, I know this sounds very straightforward, but it's key is keeping up on basic software provisions, on your device that basically protect it. So keeping up on software updates that operating systems, regardless of what you use, are there to basically, make the defenses of your device stronger. So those are two basic things that, are pretty easy to do, that can basically prevent this or make it more likely that you're going to catch that phishing email.
Jay, before you go on to government scams, I just like to briefly mention that so far we've been talking about scams committed by people far away that you may not know, but oftentimes fraud hits a lot closer to home. Sometimes it's a loved one or a caretaker. Oftentimes in an advanced age, not everyone can take care of themselves anymore. And sometimes you ask someone else to take care of your finances. And unfortunately, sometimes those people take advantage of that. So earlier this year, we prosecuted someone who was the caretaker, managed the finances for an elderly woman. I think she was almost 80 years old. And over the course of 2 years, he stole all her life savings. He bought 32 guns. He bought knives. He bought a bunch of personal items, depleted her entire life savings. And a lot of it was possible because she was unable to keep track of her own accounts. She wasn't reading her bank statements. She wasn't reading her credit reports. And that's an important way to help monitor what's going on in your finances. If you keep a regular eye on your on your financial statements, you can see when something looks suspicious. And luckily, in this case, we were actually able to get the money back. We were to get justice for the victim, get her full restitution, but it's not always possible. But just keep in mind, sometimes it's someone close to home who's going to try to defraud you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alex. And that was a great case. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you very much. That's spot on. So Will, we're still talking about types of scams here. I want to mention one we call a government scam. Can you just explain to everyone what a government scam is and how that operates?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a fairly frequent version of these scams. So we've talked about the family-oriented delivery, right? We've talked about the romantic entry. This one, in terms of the government scam, first comes to mind is the IRS. Nobody on the call necessarily wants to get a call from the IRS. And, the fraudster basically represents an important, legitimate U.S. agency that is here to collect taxes, right, and fund the government. And that's a form of scam where the fraudster is basically appealing to your sense of accountability, right? Everybody here is looking to do the right thing. And when somebody represents themselves to be a government official, like in this case, the IRS, and it can come in other forms, and ask for delivery of a fine or back taxes via the telephone, a lot of people can get thrown off. They don't want to be, the consequence on the phone call from the fraudster is you don't want to be referred to jail. You don't want to see Jay McCormick or Alex Chen in court. So people, may act on that and they want to make this problem go away. So that's a very frequent form of it. But as everybody here on the call can share, at least from the government side, this can come in the form of a local or state official asking to pay not necessarily your income taxes, but property taxes in arrears. You can also have something as simple as, we talked about the bail scams, like your grandson may be in jail. That's another form of that. Someone's purporting to be a government official and try to collect bail for a loved one who is nowhere near in jeopardy or locked up. So that's a couple different ways it comes in.
So, Will, I want to ask you, you mentioned that people pose as a government agency and they try to seek some information and they get you to pay money. We got a question in the chat that I think is kind of spot on. Are you familiar with another scheme where you'll get a notification that your social security number has been suspended and you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to, to release that suspension?
Yeah, I am. That's a great one. It's pretty effective for sure. And you think about it, like we've spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about how to protect your personal information, your personal identifiers. That scam, asking about the social security number or referencing it, that appeals to, again, your sense of accountability. And, it's basically, I think it's a more sophisticated level of trickery by these guys. We see that as well. And again, as Alex can attest to, Jay, no legitimate government official would ask to conduct business like this over the phone. Everybody knows here that things like that happen via snail mail and like a proper paper envelope that's going to be delivered to your residence. And you can hold it in your hands and read it. The government can't work this way. To be perfectly frank, it's not a situation where the government will say, hey, we're going to take your money over the phone. Unfortunately, our government just isn't that efficient.
And oftentimes, if you're in doubt, you can go online or ask around. There's official phone numbers you can call, like the IRS. There is a landline you can actually call, and you can verify if you really do have a tax issue. Odds are you probably don't, but it's an important way. You can just contact the real authorities.
Yeah. Will, would the IRS ever send you an email? Because I get these emails every day. Maybe you guys do too, telling me that I owe back taxes for properties I've never owned and I didn't file my personal income tax 10 years ago. Would they just send me an email out of the blue seeking my
Absolutely
social?
not. No, no. My colleagues at IRS don't conduct business that way. What they want is a record, just like I would. We want a record that we could deliver and say, hey, we sent this at this time. Just like any other kind of bill. That they don't do business in that manner.
So, Will, I want to mention, we talked about being vigilant to prevent yourself from falling prey to a phishing scam. What should you do if you get these types of emails purporting to be from some government agency seeking personal information?
Very much the same thing as the asking the person to identify themselves. That almost always works. I've done this myself, actually, when I've received these calls. Say, okay, like, where are you calling from? Can you send me your email? Like, let me know, like, I'll email you back. That's what you do. You offer to say, hey, send me your email and, I'll email you back. They won't have email addresses or domains that are legitimate. So most times they just wipe their hands of this potential victim and they may move on. That's a trick that works pretty well.
And kind of, Will, along the same lines, we just got a great question. What if you get notification that says, because I get these emails too, all your accounts have been hacked. You need to pay 1,000 Bitcoin to someone else in order to get your information released. What should you do if that happens?
You shouldn't take any action at all. Any legitimate entity, whether it's the government or a business, wouldn't work in that manner. They wouldn't want to deal with money that's basically volatile, right? Or a form of money with digital currency, if you will. Digital currency is swings in value every day. But what it is it's very, very hard to track. So that's something you take a step back. Again, you pause yourself, you stop, and you say, wait a sec. I wouldn't do this if I was at the grocery store paying for groceries. I wouldn't do this in any other kind of transaction. So why is this business asking me to take these extra steps?
So, Will, you kind of hit on it a little bit, and you talked about cryptocurrency, and legitimate businesses wouldn't want cryptocurrency. How about if someone tells you there's a virus on your computer or your accounts have been hacked and they ask for payment in gift cards? Does that raise any red flags for you?
Very much so. Yeah, so very much so, because the criminals can basically take those gift cards and then trade them for value somewhere else with other criminals. So, the gift cards, that's also, it's not a good business sense, right? Why would you want to have business cards as opposed to cash, which can be used everywhere, right? So that's just another trick where there's no way to really easily work backwards from those gift cards when I come into the picture, right? If we're lucky to get a call from somebody and, I get to do my job, which I enjoy, which is tracking this down and finding somebody, it's harder to do because the victim was the one who took their own cash, bought the gift cards, and then the gift cards go to the bad guys and they get quickly converted or transferred to somebody else. It's all this, what we call layering in fraud or in money laundering.
Got it. So before we open up for questions, I just want to touch on some Medicare scams and one kind of massive scam in particular that I want everyone to be aware of. And it is, sorry, I'm getting some chats here. I would like to just talk about telemedicine scams for a moment. I'm sure there's people on here, your phone rings all day with people trying to sell you things. And I just want to tell you about those scams, how they operate, how the fraudsters make money, and what you can do to prevent yourself from falling victim to one of these scams. So let me just explain what telemedicine is. So telemedicine is basically It's a means of connecting, patients to medical professionals via technology. And that technology is usually the internet or a telephone. And taking a step back, telemedicine is great, right? Just the thought of telemedicine is really good because it can make it easier to interact with medical professionals. As we all saw during the pandemic, I don't know about you, but I was constantly on Zooms, communicating with people to see if anyone in my family had COVID. So it makes it easier to interact with medical professionals. It reduces costs in general, in theory, because it's easier to communicate with the doctor. You don't have to travel somewhere. The billing is easier. And it can, in a place like New Hampshire, telemedicine in general is great because rural jurisdictions, it makes it easier to link up with medical professionals. But however, telemedicine is prevalent for fraud for a couple of reasons. Because as I mentioned, so imagine you're on your phone talking to a doctor. That doctor doesn't have sufficient ability to really meaningfully assess you sometimes. Therefore, it makes it more difficult for them to determine whether you have a medical necessity for some type of product, right? So kind of the nature of telemedicine in certain circumstances can make it more difficult. That ease that I talked about, it is so easy that sometimes it can lead to overutilization. And what I mean by that is it's so easy to schedule visits that doctors will schedule visits that they don't necessarily need to would do in the absence of telemedicine because they can just bill for it, right? Because it's so easy. You just get the app, you push a button, and they can bill. And lastly, a reason why telemedicine is prone to so much fraud is the nature of how doctors are paid, at least in my experience, prosecuting and investigating telemedicine companies and doctors. So the doctors and other medical professionals are typically paid on a per patient basis, right? Per consultation. So if you think about it, what that does is that creates an incentive for the doctor or the other medical professional to make a referral and then just see the next patient, move as quickly as possible. So that's what we call kickbacks. So, that is a reason why telemedicine is prone to so much fraud. So how do these scams work? And again, I kind of alluded to it. I know my parents get these calls all the time. So it starts with a call center. And a call center does everything it can do to acquire your information. So they will advertise on television. There used to be a commercial with Joe Namath was on there talking about Medicare. I saw one yesterday advertising Medicare Part C. Call this number, see if you qualify. So they also have advertisements on the internet, on social media. They send you direct mailings. They do whatever they can do to get you on the phone and have an opportunity to get your information, to extract that from you. And what they do is they promise you products at low or no cost. Who doesn't want something that's free and arguably they tell you could help? So once the call centers, get their hooks in you, whether you're on the phone or you sent them your information, they are very aggressive on the phone. And I've listened to hours of these recordings in my career. And they use very aggressive tactics. They're deceptive. As Alex mentioned, sometimes they speak broken English because these call centers are usually based outside of the United States. They confuse people on the phone. Like I said, I've listened to so many of these calls. The Medicare beneficiaries receiving the calls are thoroughly confused about who's calling them, what is this about? And before the call center calls you, they already know the product that they want to push upon you. And that product is always changing. Recently, we've seen the COVID-19 testing kits. I'm sure somebody on here got some COVID-19 testing kits in the mail. Some other common schemes are braces, right? You get boxes of braces in the mail that you don't want, you don't need. In the past, it's been lidocaine and these pain creams that don't really do much and they're very expensive. There's been schemes regarding foot baths, which essentially are these expensive chemicals you're supposed to pour in a bucket and put your feet in, and they actually don't do anything. So there's also genetic testing where they will tell you you need to swab your cheek and send it back, and we're going to tell you whether you carry a gene that may or may not lead to passing on some genetic mutation. So the product changes, but the scheme is the same. Call center, they get you on the phone or they get you to send in their information. And then what the call centers do is they tell you that a doctor will be in contact, or sometimes they'll put you on the phone with a medical professional, again, who doesn't know you, who doesn't have an idea of your complete medical history. And they're on the phone with you for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and they're just confirming information. Is this where you live? What's your surgical history? Do you take any medicine? Nothing in any depth, right? Nothing that a real doctor or legitimate doctor would think would form a basis to prescribe something. So once that happens, the call centers sell your information and that doctor's order, right? The doctors would sign off on an order saying, Joe Schmo needs a brace. That information is sold to telemedicine companies, and the telemedicine companies sometimes sell it to other providers. Sometimes they sell it to competitors in the same industry. So your information and those orders are just being sold over and over and over again. And sometimes you get a product in the mail, sometimes you don't. In my experience, if you get it, it's something you don't want, you don't need. I've had lots of cases where people with amputations are getting braces for feet and knees that they don't even have. Right? So that's telltale that this is a fraudulent scheme. So I've already talked about the examples. And the way that the fraudsters make money is once they have your order, like I said, they'll sell it to other companies. They'll sell your information, whether they don't sell your order, they can just sell your PII. So that's your personal identifying information. And then sometimes the telemedicine company themselves own a business that can then bill Medicare. So an example would be in a genetic testing scheme where someone on the phone that you've never met tells you that you need to, for free, we're going to send you a kit where you swab your cheek and send it back. The telemedicine company will secretly own a lab or being paid kickbacks from the lab that would then test every way possible for any genetic mutation in that sample. And the government gets billed $50,000 to $60,000 per one of those swabs. And the government Medicare pays a lot of money in response to that. So that's how the fraudsters profit in these schemes. So if you get one of these calls, as Will said before, you get a call in the middle of the day and they call repeatedly, they call all the time. As Will said, legitimate government agencies will never call you out of the blue like that. So I will tell you, Medicare will not call you and they will not offer you free products, right? That's not what Medicare does. They will not do that. So if somebody calls you and they're offering you braces or COVID-19 testing kits, your antenna should go up. You should realize this is a fraud scheme. Personally, I would just hang up the phone. So if this has already happened to you, or if this does happen to you, as U.S. Attorney Young mentioned in her opening remarks, you should call 1-800-HHS-TIPS. So they'll take a brief summary of your allegation. That information is then passed to investigators at the U.S. Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General. And you should expect, if you call in, at some point, an agent will reach out to you. So if an agent reaches out to you and they want to schedule an interview, sorry, I just got a message here. If an agent reaches out to you, don't be surprised. You flag it for them, right? The government is following up. They want to make sure that they can get to the bottom of this. So you should expect to have an agent reach out. Sometimes they'll just swing by your house unexpected. So if that happens, obviously ask for their credentials, make sure you can verify they are who they are. And you should feel comfortable speaking to them because they're trying to, ferret out these fraudsters, which in the end, we all pay the cost for. So things that you can do to protect yourself, like I said, when you get one of these calls, never give out your PII, your personal identifying information, your Medicare number, your date of birth, your social. Medicare will not call you. I tell people all the time, I tell my parents, I tell my family members, never share your PII with anybody unless you initiate the discussion, unless you affirmatively call somebody, right? If you're getting a call, if you're getting an email and they want you to confirm things, don't do it. Only if you initiate the contact. That way you know who you're calling and you know that it's legitimate. Another good way to kind of, make sure that this is not happening to your Medicare account is when you get those monthly, we call them EOBs, explanation of benefits, you should look at them. Oh, so we got some good comments here. You should look at your EOBs, review them, and see, does that make sense? Did I really get that service? Do I even know who this doctor is? You'll be surprised how many times when you review your EOB, you will see a fraudulent transaction on your Medicare account for someone you don't know for something you didn't get. And if that happens, obviously call, 1-800-HHS-TIPS. So, that was 52 minutes, a lot of information, a lot of different types of scams. We've gotten some good questions. We have about 8 to 10 minutes to open up the floor for any questions. So please feel free to ask away in the chat. And to the extent that we can answer anything, we're happy to do so.
And there were a couple that came in on the chat. Excuse me, I'm going to see if I can find them right now. One person had asked, she said she's being stalked on social media. And is there anything that the federal government is doing to try to cut back on that stalking that's happening?
Sure, what just happened there. Will, are you familiar with that type of scheme? Have you ever seen anything like that? Do you care to comment?
I haven't specifically. I'm aware of cyber stalking happening, but if we are to ultimately charge a crime, we usually rely on other criminal activity that's happened along with the stalking. Correct? It's kind of a difficult situation there.
So
I
is
guess
that something, Will, you would recommend that someone reports to a local department? Will that eventually make its way up to the federal level?
It could, yeah, but yeah, to your point, and I certainly defer to Alex. I think the first step is to report it to a local police department because you want to make sure any threats about your physical well-being are accounted for. That's first and foremost.
yeah, the most important thing is if there are threats in the repeated messages, report it to law enforcement immediately, and it could be a federal case. Our office has certainly done those cases before.
Person wanted you to comment on ads on YouTube because they said they're seeing things like how to make money on Amazon. And how do you tell if those ads are legitimate or not, or just ignore them?
I mean, yeah, I would just say ignore those. Someone's paying money to place ads on YouTube, so they're making money off you somehow. I would not click any of those pop-up ads, banner ads. There's no such thing as free products, free money, easy ways to make money. I would be highly suspicious, and I bet all of those would sell your information and would result in you being a victim of some sort of phishing attack or something. I just wouldn't click those types of advertisements.
Yeah.
I don't know, Alex, what do you?
Yeah, any sort of investment solicitation, anything that says you're going to earn money really quickly or with no risk, that doesn't exist. It's almost definitely a scam. So as Jay said, best to ignore it.
Yep. Okay, thank you. One person, I don't know if you can help with this or not. They said that a lot of the banks and utility companies now, they want you all to do electronic statements and things like that. And they're starting to charge for paper statements. And a lot of the elderly still do not have computers. Any advice on what we can say to our banks or what we can do so that elderly who are on very fixed income are not paying money they need for food and other things to get bank statements to monitor their accounts? Tough one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's partly a function of maybe a regulatory issue too. For the banks to be allowed to force that, only electronic transaction. That's something that regulators or actually talking to legislators about that. Looking for advocates that are certainly sensitive to those issues.
That's an excellent idea to talk to our legislators and have them help us out with that. Somebody mentioned, and this is more of a tip than a question, when they get things that are, that are informing them that their accounts have been hacked or whatever, and click here or call this phone number, you already said don't do that. But one thing that this person mentioned is they actually look up the information for that bank or that account, go to the back of their credit card and get an actual true value phone number, a good phone number to call. And I think that's something that we definitely want people to be aware of. Don't call a phone number in an email that you're suspicious of, so.
Yeah,
Go online,
unfortunately,
get a good phone number, go on your card, things like that.
yeah, unfortunately, as we keep kind of, the theme here is be vigilant. Unfortunately, you have to be suspicious. There's a lot of money in these types of scams. There's a lot of ways for them to get your information electronically. or, through other means. So you just kind of have to expect that people are targeting you.
I'm only going to do maybe one or two more. And this one I'm curious about too, because I get this. You get emails that say, there was a package for you and they can't deliver it and they want you to click on something. How do they get my email to tell me that I have a package? Where are they getting that from?
I mean, odds are over the years, you probably provided your email address and your contact information to hundreds of different websites and government organizations. And unfortunately, leaks happen all the time. Places get hacked and places will sell your information on the internet. So your email address is probably available publicly in the hands of a lot of people. But if it looks suspicious, delete it, don't open it, don't click on anything inside.
I think I only had one more question, and one might have just come in. Somebody mentioned, does antivirus software, how does it protect you? Not in detail, but is it protecting me from these type of things?
So it's a question probably best fitted for an IT professional.
Okay.
My guess would be that, again, my own take is, again, the advice we've been giving for the last hour is prevention is the best medicine here. Is by far the best thing you can do. A good antivirus software package might be able to prevent a virus from taking over your computer. But again, the best advice we can give you is stay vigilant.
Mhm.
Don't click on these suspicious links. Don't give hackers the chance to get into your computer in the first instance.
All righty. There was one more, and that's going to be the last one because we're running out of time. And do any of you know what might be going on with the FCC or other places to help? I know there's already been a lot done, but to help cut down on these spoof calls so we don't actually even get them. Anybody know?
That's unfortunately, the FCC has, for example, no don't call lists, as everyone on this call probably knows. That's not very effective. Unfortunately, spoofing is very easy to do. It's very cheap for fraudsters. And oftentimes they operate overseas, as well noted. And the FCC, unfortunately, we don't have the power to reach overseas to grab these people and stop them. It's a regulatory issue. It's troubling the government greatly, but there's no short-term easy solution.
All right. Well, I think one of the things that we say is don't answer calls. Let it go to your voicemail as well. So that's one thing you might want to do. I've gotten spoofed with my own phone number, and I'm sure a lot of other people have as well. Okay, we're going to cut the questions now. So because we're just on 7, I just want to wrap up. I do want to thank Jane and Jay and William and Alex for all the information they provided for educating us today. It's been a pleasure to learn from you and to learn how we can stay safer. I think we're going to have to keep doing this, though, because every time we figure out how to deal with something, they figure out something else to throw at us. But like you said, Alex, just be vigilant. I want to thank the audience for joining us today for today's discussion. I really hope that you've learned some good things from our presenters and from the people in the chat, and that you find this information useful, that you'll share it with family and friends. We do want to tell you about a couple AARP resources really quickly, and Ashley will put these in the chat. AARP has the Fraud Watch Network, and it's a free resource. It's for everyone. You can look up scams. You can get tips on scams. You can get updates to your phone. There's webinars you can watch, all kinds of things to educate you. They also have the Fraud Watch Network helpline that has professionals, people who can help you deal with fraud if you have been a victim of that. And yeah, Ashley just put that information into the chat. AARP is not all about fraud, though. We do like to do other things. We do like to have fun and all kinds of stuff. So we encourage you to visit AARP's website, aarp.org/New Hampshire. You don't have to be a member. You may have to, for some things, set up an account, but you don't have to be a member. And to check AARP New Hampshire's website, which Ashley is also going to put in the chat, aarp.org/NH. Virtual programs, in-person programs, all kinds of things that you could do, all kinds of things you can learn. We want to share our email address, which is nhaarp@aarp.org, in case you want to volunteer with AARP, in case you want to ask us questions. And I mentioned at the beginning that I'm a Speakers Bureau member, and we have a couple presentations on fraud. So if you belong to groups who couldn't join today, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to do a presentation for you. So with that, I'm going to bring this to a close. I thank you for joining us. Please be safe, be careful, and be vigilant for certain. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna stop this meeting now.